Okay, so for a lot of years, it really bothered me that the deities for the Sumerian and Babylonian mythos and the deities and demigods book for Dungeons and Dragons were female, and the war gods, yeah. And it occurred to me eventually, finally, that there was a good reason for that, and that is that the men who are really warriors become married to war, often have a passion for war, love war, and so it's as if they're married to the goddess of war, and so it doesn't speak to women as exemplars of war, but women as goddesses, as exemplars of the focus and the passions of men. And I was thinking today, as I'm driving back to Dallas from San Antonio, about that saying that all's fair in love and war. And I used to think that was really just a statement on just what it appears to be, which is simply fairness, that anything's okay in love and war. And I think that's definitely the surface level of that saying. I don't think it really speaks to the entirety of what it is. I think that... What's that, young man? Hey, yeah, there's a big old white truck right there, isn't there? My son has made a recent leap where he's beginning to actually finally put two words together at a time. And sometimes it's a verb and a noun, and sometimes it's an adjective and a noun, but anything that it is, it's pretty awesome. If you're a parent, those little leaps are really cool when they start to happen. So anyway, so that saying, all's fair in love and war, I think that, I'm not super well acquainted with violence. I'm more acquainted with violence in some ways than a lot of people are. Some kinds of violence. And then there are other ways in which I'm not at all, and then even in the ways I'm well acquainted with violence, not well acquainted with violence, just more than other people. Ultimately, I have to say I'm not that well acquainted with violence. But I was in the Marine Corps, and I've actually been in combat, what little combat I actually saw. I've been in a few fights, and, I'll leave it at that. Anyway, but if you've been in a violent situation, if you've been in fear for your life, if you've ever had to put your sights on another human being, if you've sent rounds down range, and you're a thoughtful person, you know that there's a price paid. If you've ever been in a fist fight, you know that as much as you hated that motherfucker, that you wanted to beat, you wanted to fucking beat their mouth bloody so that their words, they paid for their words. If you wanted to smash their face so that they paid for their actions, you still know you didn't want to kill them. Maybe you wanted to leave them broken on the ground, but you didn't want to break their neck or break their back. You probably didn't even want to break an arm or a finger. You just wanted to bloody them and beat them. Well, that's not war. Maybe that's an analogy for war between nations, where just because you want to defeat another nation doesn't mean you want to assault their fields and destroy every single one of them. You don't want genocide. Well, there are levels of violence, and people who really know war and really know violence know that there are times and places where if you want to be really effective, you have to set aside those moral boundaries that prevent us, those adaptive and evolutionary boundaries even, that prevent us from really, really, really hurting our enemy and really, really, really being effective. Because if you're gonna, unless you're a really skilled fighter that's got one hell of a punch, you don't want to go in swinging for the face, no matter how much you hate their face and hate their mouth. You want to go in, and you don't want to go in swinging. You want to take them in the nuts. You want to take down their knees. You want to punch them in the throat. You want to punch them in the eyes. Well, not punch. You want to gouge them in the eyes. You want to send your elbow right for their temple. You want to put them down. You don't want to wage war. You want to put them down. You want to drop the nuke, not send in the Marines. But most of the time we send in the Marines. And that made me think about love, which brings us back to that saying. You know, what in love is the equivalent of dropping the nuke? What in love makes that saying, all's fair in love and war, meaningful about love? And why are goddesses, war goddesses, Athena too, for that matter, she's, you know, a goddess of wisdom, but she's spear and shield. And of course, I'm sure the Morrigan in Celtic mythology appeals to the Mother of God by Catholics and Orthodox, not just for mercy and protection, but for victory. So I think there's a really rich and varied set of things to consider there. You know, the interaction between the male supplicant to the female goddess. Not just supplicant, because that's worship on your knees, but supplication in action, when you pick up the spear, when you pull the trigger, and that whole maelstrom in war and violence and love and passion. So yeah, for those of you who like thinking about those things and want to interact with that, there you go.